All right, everyone. Venezuela's economy has been basically flatlined for years now, and until this year, there were no meaningful U.S. sanctions on Venezuela. When people, socialists usually, leftists, when they try to cover for the ass of Maduro and Chavez and socialism, like because there's an election going on here in the West right now, and it's basically an argument between socialism and sane people, and so the socialists are like, well, no, Venezuela's not really socialist. The CIA or U.S. sanctions destroyed it. Go back, though, and actually read the history of like the last 5 years in Venezuela, and you'll find their economy collapsed when the only sanctions on their country, and this dates to this year, the only sanctions before that really were on a handful of individuals and a few industries within Venezuela, basically Maduro's inner circle. There were no sanctions on anything oil-related, mainly because the U.S. didn't want to raise the oil prices. We were enjoying extremely low oil prices at the time. They're a little bit higher now, although they're still historically fairly low. And Venezuela is still hemorrhaging money. They were going into hyperinflation, had a chronic shortage of goods and services before we got involved to any meaningful level. Now we've sanctioned them to try to put pressure on Maduro. They do, by the way, the sanctions appear to be working. But that we didn't cause the tailspin in their economy, and it dates to the Obama era. How the hell is Trump responsible? So you have this hit piece here that's trying to blame Trump for their problems. Oh, it's making their poverty so bad. Their economy would still be collapsing if Trump hadn't been elected. You think Hillary, by the way, would have done any different? She would have been pressured internally to put sanctions on Maduro at some point. Yes, the U.S. is supposed to not say... The U.S. should just be totally kind to Maduro when he's having his own people executed and basically destroying his economy, endangering several of our allies, by the way, in the region, threatening openly the Colombians and the Guianans. Yeah, we should deal with that. We shouldn't sanction him at all. Because socialism is good and Orange Man bad, so it's bad that we're sanctioning Maduro. That doesn't make any sense. Dude, some of the center leftists not that long ago were saying that we should invade Venezuela. These same people pretended to get really, really anxious, really upset when Trump said, oh, well, maybe we need a greater involvement. Yeah, he just left it there. He didn't say we were invading. I can remember when Pat Robertson said on Fox News once, oh, we should assassinate Hugo Chavez. That was back when he was in charge. Some people think he was assassinated. I think he was just a fat ass who died of a heart attack. How old was he? He was in his 50s, right? Or something like that. He died, I think, fairly young. Now, his heart fucking stopped because he was a pig. You know, he's sitting there eating high on the hog like every socialist dictator does while his people, you know, enjoyed welfare crumbs. It was very funny because people were praising his economic miracle 5 or 6 years ago before the collapse began. Like Salon had an article literally by that title, Chavez Economic Miracle. This is real socialism. We should do that here. Look at how wonderful. Everyone has free healthcare and free subsidized stuff and subsidized education. The quality of life is up. Infant mortality is down. Wow, we can do that here maybe, said Salon at the time. Bet you're glad you didn't do that. See, it's real socialism. Socialism is always not called real socialism once it inevitably begins its downward spiral, because the centrality spawned by socialism, think of it this way. Here's the softball explanation as to why socialism and leftism suck. Socialism itself, insofar as you are simply saying collective ownership of the means of production, public ownership, subsidies, the welfare sort of side. The welfare side isn't the problem. The centrality required to administer it is the problem. The problem is that you need a centralized structure in order to actually administer socialism. This is something you don't have with a free market. We have some centrality and bureaucratic strangulation even in the most free market economies of the world. By the way, the U.S. is maybe in the top 10th, but it's not number one anymore for being capitalistic. It should be, by all rights. It should be hyper-capitalistic. We'd be doing way better, but, you know, the government likes to bomb people, so we can't do that yet. Anyway, in a socialist system, you have utter centrality. If you look at Venezuela, most aspects of life are centralized and nationalized there. Transportation is nationalized. Fuel, which is, you know, the crux of their economy, is nationalized. Many, many aspects of life. The electrical system is nationalized. The water systems are nationalized. Basically, everything is handled at the most central level. If I'm a government bureaucrat, if I'm centralized, I have the power over this. If there are no problems, I will make problems in order to justify more staff. more of a budget, more income for me, because that's human nature. In a free market, that leads to competition between potentially millions and millions of different people. They're all vying with each other. The only time that the government needs to step in, really, in a true free capitalist society, is to break up trusts and monopolies and keep the competition going. As long as you can do that, yeah, you have a never-ending spiral of good and healthiness of people uplifted out of poverty. During the period of greatest capitalism in this country, it was the greatest period in human history as far as times for the poor and the middle class. Rapidly expanding middle and upper middle class. The poor got less poor until we started centralizing it with the war on poverty, and now poverty is more systemic. We managed to solve many problems. There, though, what happened is they centralized everything, and what happened is Chavez was a dictator, essentially. He created a loose and weak constitution that apparently Maduro doesn't even acknowledge exists at this point. There is no fundamental functional legislature in Venezuela anymore. It's an autocratic state. What happened is they centralized everything, and Chavez said, hey, there's no reason to really develop anything else. We're just going to keep pumping this shit out of the ground. It'll never go down in price. One man made the mistake of thinking the oil prices would continue to rise because he believed the lie of peak oil. He didn't realize hydraulic fracturing, oil shale, the rise of green energy, the rise of U.S. natural gas and Russian natural gas. He didn't foresee any of these things. He laid the groundwork for his whole country to get fucked. It had nothing to do with the United States. Our contribution to Venezuela being fucked was starting to exploit our own fuel resources. Obama, by the way, I will give him credit, and I've consistently done this for one important thing. When faced by challenges from the left within his own Democratic Party to crack down on fracturing and gas exploration and everything else, he said no. He stood aside and let the private marketplace, with some priming the pump, of course, handle it. He did the right thing. Obama is partially responsible for the economic situation today. Trump is more responsible at this point, of course, deregulating things, helping the other side of industry to prosper off the back of that fuel boom. But by and large, world politics is being massively shifted by the fact that we're now basically a fuel exporter. We got oil and gas to spare. We're the biggest in both. We're the biggest for oil now, I think. And we've overtook everyone else for natural gas long ago. Natural gas is finding all sorts of new buyers. Green energy is rapidly expanding in the U.S. Technology is beginning to move forward to the next generation for batteries, which is a big thing. Yes, you will probably see a lot more hybrid cars in the future. Eventually, you might see fully solar cars being used for local and mass transportation. Imagine if you had efficient enough gathering of sun, you could have like a tram covered in solar panels. Yeah, for light transport within cities, it'd be very efficient. Absolutely. Or you put those cells on the side of buildings, run it down below ground, and run your subway system off of it. You know, it'd be pretty good. So yeah, Venezuela's, the New York Times is wrong. Venezuela's collapsing because of Chavez, and started collapsing in the middle of the Obama era. It has nothing to do with Trump. This is like when Joe Biden came out and said, well, under me and Barack's watch, there never would have been Russian election interference. But literally, if you assume it happened at all, it happened when you were there. You were vice president at the time, though. Trump hadn't won yet. How can you interfere in an election that's already happened retrospectively? It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any sense. That's about all. Peace out.